Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I became a mom about 2 years ago, and like most new parents, I found myself pretty isolated. My husband and I both work full-time jobs that pay decently, but we're not rich by any means. We just budget really well and live within our means. When my son was about 6 months old, I was desperately looking for other moms to connect with because staying home all day with a baby was driving me crazy. That's when I reconnected with this old friend from high school. Let's call her Karen because, well, you'll see why. We had lost touch years ago, but she reached out when she saw my baby photos on social media. She had 2 boys and was going through some marriage troubles with her husband. They were separated but still living together and legally married. She was a stay-at-home mom while he worked. At first, it seemed great to have a mom friend, someone who understood the struggles of dealing with kids all day. We started hanging out regularly, and I'll admit, I usually offered to pay for things. I figured she was going through a rough time financially with the separation, and I didn't mind helping out occasionally. But looking back now, I realize it became a pattern. Every single time we went anywhere, I ended up paying. Coffee dates, lunch, activities for the kids, it was always me pulling out my wallet. I started suggesting cheaper places to try to manage the costs. The breaking point came when we planned to go to Applebee's for lunch. I specifically chose it because it's affordable and I knew I'd be paying again. Karen complained that she was expecting somewhere more fancy. She said this like we were on a date or something, which was weird since I'm happily married and this was supposed to be a casual mom hangout. I told her that Applebee's had good food and was budget friendly, but she kept pushing for somewhere nicer. I laughed it off because what else could I do? We went to Applebee's anyway, and sure enough, I paid the bill. Fast forward to last week. Karen suggested we take the kids to the county fair. She made it sound like a fun play date, and I was excited because my son loves rides and games. Never once during our planning did I say I would pay for everyone. I mean, we're talking about taking basically a family of 5 to a fair, me, my son, her, and her 2 boys. That's expensive. We met at the fair entrance, and I went to buy admission passes for my son and myself. Karen suddenly announced that she had left her wallet in her car. I told her it was no problem and that I'd cover everyone if she could just send me the money later through the app. She quickly agreed and thanked me, promising she would pay me back right away. I paid for all 5 admission passes, which was already over $60. But I figured it would be fine since she'd pay me back. The kids were having a blast on the rides, and everything was going well until it was time for lunch. Fair food is notoriously expensive, but the kids were hungry and cranky. We got in line at a food stand, and that's when things went completely off the rails. Her 2 boys started shouting out everything they wanted. Funnel cakes, cotton candy, corn dogs, slushies. Karen just stood there letting them yell out their demands without any attempt to control them or set boundaries. I was getting embarrassed by the scene they were causing, so I quickly started ordering to get us out of the line. But then Karen started adding more items to the order. She asked for a turkey leg, some nachos, and another corn dog on top of everything her kids had already demanded. The total came to $110 for fair food. I was shocked but paid it because we were holding up the line and the kids were getting more restless. After we ate, it was getting really hot and all the kids were tired and cranky. My son needed his afternoon nap and I could tell the day was winding down. I asked her if she could send me the money for her share before we left. She looked me directly in the eyes with this blank expression and told me she didn't have any money. She said she was completely broke and that her husband had cut her off from their accounts. I felt my stomach drop. I asked her why she had suggested coming to the fair and promised to pay me back if she knew she didn't have any money. She explained that I didn't understand because my husband and I both had good jobs, while she was a stay-at-home mom so it was harder for her. She said I could afford it. I was speechless. I just said okay, put my son in his stroller and started walking toward the exit. She followed with her kids. But it gets worse. When we were leaving the fair, she stops at this escape room attraction that wasn't included in the admission passes. She told me how much she wished they could do the escape room because it looked so fun. She kept giving me these puppy dog eyes and expectant looks, clearly hoping I'd offered to pay for that too. The audacity made me feel physically sick. I told her no, we needed to get going because it was getting late and my son needed his nap. We said goodbye, but that same day, she started calling and texting about our next hangout. She asked when we could get together again and said she could come over to my house right away with her boys. I told her I'd get back to her on that. That was 4 days ago. She's called and texted every single day since then, and I haven't responded to any of it. When I told my husband what happened, he was furious. He said I needed to cut her off completely because it was ridiculous how she was taking advantage of me and had clearly planned the whole thing. He was right. The more I thought about it, the more I realized she had orchestrated the entire situation. She suggested the fare knowing she had no money, lied about paying me back, and then tried to guilt me into paying for even more stuff. Finally, I decided to text her directly about the situation. I told her that I knew she'd been texting about hanging out, but I wasn't interested unless she could pay me back for the other day. I explained that I had spent a lot of money, and she had lied about sending me the money. I said I felt like she took advantage of me because we were in front of the kids when I asked for payment, and that I would never do something like that to her. I pointed out that she was assuming we were well off just because we both worked, but it was actually because we budget carefully. I mentioned that if she'd been honest about not having money, I would have brought snacks and we could have gone to the free splash pad or park instead. Her response made my jaw drop. She asked what I expected from her since she was depressed and going through a divorce with no money. She said she had told me the truth and I was using it against her. She accused me of holding everything I paid for over her head when she never asked me to do that. I replied that she literally did ask me to pay since she had promised to send me the money and lied to my face. I pointed out that she made sure to wait until after I paid for everything to tell me she was broke. I said I understood she was depressed and I was sorry for what she was going through, but that didn't justify lying and guilt-tripping me. She responded that she had enough going on and really didn't need to be dealing with this. I asked her directly if she was going to pay me back or not. Her next message was even worse. She said no, I didn't need her to pay me back because I was doing just fine. She called me a greedy person and said I had my husband paying for everything, so I had no idea what it was like to struggle. She went on about how she was struggling so badly, staying with her husband for the kids even though he didn't help her with anything and she never had money. That's when I remembered something that had been bugging me. I pointed out that she had literally shown up to the fair with a Starbucks drink in her hand. Her final response was completely unhinged. She asked if I was going to watch all her expenses and said she didn't want to be friends with someone who was going to hold everything over her head. She called me greedy again and said I thought I was better than her. She claimed I always looked down on people and that she never should have told me anything about her marriage because I clearly didn't care. I didn't even bother responding. I just blocked her number and all her social media accounts. The whole thing was so ridiculous. She never once offered to pay for anything. She always had excuses. She showed up to a fair she couldn't afford with a Starbucks in hand. She manipulated the situation by waiting until after I'd paid to tell me she was broke. The worst part is how she tried to make me the villain for expecting her to keep her word about paying me back. According to her logic, because my husband and I work and budget responsibly, we should just subsidize her lifestyle indefinitely. I'm honestly relieved to have her out of my life. My husband was absolutely right. She was completely taking advantage of me, and I was too nice to see it clearly. My name doesn't matter, but what does matter is that I'm 30 years old and I've been raising my 16-year-old sister since I was 15. Yeah, you read that right. When I was just a sophomore in high school, our mom died in a car accident. My sister was only 1 year old then, barely walking and saying her first words. Our father was a successful businessman who owned several companies across the state. He loved us, I know he did, but he was always working. After mom died, he threw himself even deeper into his work, probably as a way to cope with the grief. He hired a nanny for my sister, but she had severe separation anxiety and would scream whenever I wasn't around. The nanny was great during school hours, but the moment I walked through the door, my sister would run to me and refuse to let go. When it came time for college, most kids my age were excited about dorm life and freedom. Not me. Dad bought me an apartment near campus so my sister could stay with me. The nanny would bring her over after school, and I'd take care of her from then until bedtime. I studied while she did her homework. I made her dinner while reviewing for exams. I never missed a single school play, spelling bee, or soccer game, even if it meant skipping my own classes sometimes. My friends thought I was crazy, but I didn't care. This little girl needed me, and I wasn't going to abandon her like everyone else had. She called me by my first name, but I was more of a parent to her than our actual father ever was. 3 years ago, everything changed. Dad started dating this woman who was only 25, just 5 years older than me at the time. She was blonde, bubbly, and clearly interested in Dad's money more than anything else. Within months, she was pregnant. When the baby was born, Dad asked me to bring my sister to meet her new half-sister. I thought it might be good for her to have another sibling, even if there was a huge age gap. I was completely wrong. The visit was a disaster. My sister sat in the corner the entire time watching this woman coo over the baby while Dad acted like a completely different person. He was so attentive to the infant, so present in a way he'd never been with us. On the drive home, my sister broke down crying. She asked me through her tears if I thought Dad loved the baby more than us. I tried to reassure her that, of course, he didn't, that she was his daughter too. But she pointed out how he never acted that way with her, how he was always working but had taken time off when the baby was born. The tears didn't stop for a week. Every time I mentioned the baby or suggested visiting again, she'd start crying and asking if Dad was going to forget about us now. So I made a decision. I told Dad we wouldn't be visiting anymore, and I refused to have anything to do with the baby. My sister came first, and that was that. Dad never married the woman, which should have been a red flag about how serious he was about the relationship. I used to joke with my sister that the baby was just a compromise kid, something Dad agreed to because his girlfriend wanted it, not because he really wanted another child. 6 months ago, Dad died suddenly of a heart attack. The funeral was hard enough without having to deal with his girlfriend's dramatics. When the will was read, it became clear that Dad's priorities had always been me and my sister. We each got substantial trust funds that would set us up for life. The baby got a small amount, enough for college maybe, but nothing compared to what we received. The girlfriend got absolutely nothing. That's when the harassment started. The first call came 2 weeks after the funeral. The woman told me she couldn't do this alone and that her daughter needed a father figure. She said I was the closest thing the baby had to a brother. I told her clearly that I wasn't her brother, that we just shared a father, and that's where it ended. She kept pushing, asking how I could be so protective of my sister but completely ignore this innocent child. I explained that my sister was my priority, that she'd been my responsibility for 15 years, and that having her daughter around upset my sister. The woman got angry and said I couldn't spoil one sister and neglect another, that it was unfair. I hung up. She kept calling, leaving voicemails about how her daughter needed a male presence and how it wasn't fair that I'd help raise one sister but not another. I ignored them all until she crossed a line I never thought she'd cross. Somehow she got my sister's phone number. The texts she sent were vicious. She told my sister that I was being cruel by keeping her away from her sister. She called my sister selfish for not sharing me. She said the baby was just innocent and my sister was being mean. My sister came to me sobbing, phone in hand, asking if I was going to leave her for the baby. I spent the entire night reassuring her that nothing would change, that she was my priority, and that I would never abandon her. The next morning I called the woman back, angrier than I'd ever been. I told her that if she ever contacted my sister again, I would take legal action against her for harassment. She got defensive and said I couldn't keep doing this, that the baby had rights too. I told her that the baby had no rights to me or my sister and that she should contact my lawyer if she wanted to discuss this further. She started yelling about how I was being vindictive and cruel, that the baby was just a child. I reminded her that my sister was also just a child, one who she'd now traumatized with her manipulative texts. I blocked her number. Over the next few weeks, my aunts and uncles started calling me. She'd somehow tracked them down and was telling them I was being heartless and cruel to an innocent child. She painted herself as a struggling single mother and me as a vindictive man who was denying a little girl her only remaining family. My uncle called and suggested maybe I should consider helping out a little since the baby was my father's daughter. I reminded him that my sister was also Dad's daughter, the one I'd been raising since she was 1 year old, the one who had separation anxiety and got upset whenever this woman or her child were mentioned. My aunt called too, saying the baby didn't ask to be born into this situation. I told her that neither did my sister when our mother died, and that I made my choice then and was sticking with it now. The calls kept coming. Family members who barely knew the situation were suddenly experts on what I should do. Some supported me, but others thought I was being unreasonable. The final straw came last week. The woman showed up at my apartment building somehow, having gotten past security with her 3-year-old daughter in tow. She was waiting by my door when I got home from work. She begged me to just talk to her and told me to look at the little girl, saying she looked just like our father. The little girl was hiding behind her mother's legs, clearly confused about why they were there. My heart did ache for the child. None of this was her fault, but I also knew what bringing her into our lives would do to my sister. I told the woman she needed to leave immediately. She pleaded for just 5 minutes and asked me to let the baby meet her sister. I told her that the baby was not my sister's sister in any way that mattered, and that she needed to go before I called security. She kept pushing, asking how I could be so heartless when the baby just wanted to know her family. That's when my sister opened the door behind me. She'd heard the voices and came to see what was happening. The moment she saw the woman and the little girl, her face went white. My sister asked quietly if they were there to take me away from her. The woman's expression changed, like she finally understood what she was dealing with. She tried to be gentle, telling my sister no and saying she just wanted her to meet her little sister. My sister looked the woman straight in the eye and said the baby wasn't her sister, then asked them to please leave us alone. The little girl started crying, probably sensing the tension. The woman picked her up and looked at me. She said this wasn't over and that the child deserved better than this. I told her she was right, that the baby did deserve better. She deserved a mother who put her needs first instead of harassing strangers. After they left, I held my sister while she cried, promising her again that nothing would change. But I also made another promise to myself. I was done being nice about this. I called my lawyer the next day and had him send a cease and desist letter. If she continued to contact me, my sister, or any of our family members, we'd pursue legal action for harassment and emotional distress. It's been quiet for a week now. I don't know if it's really over, but I hope it is. The house next door had been empty for a while, but about 6 months ago, a new family moved in. A single mom with 3 boys, ages probably 8, 10, and 12. At first, everything seemed normal. The kids would play in their backyard, and I'd see them walking to school in the mornings. The problem started when they noticed me carrying the PlayStation 5 box to my front door the day I bought it. Word travels fast among kids, and within a week they were asking if they could come over and play. The requests begin. The first time they asked was innocent enough. I was watering my plants in the front yard when the middle kid approached me and asked if they could come over and play my PlayStation. I told him that I didn't really know them yet and maybe another time would be better. They started asking every single day, sometimes individually, sometimes as a group. I tried to be polite about it, explaining that it was nothing personal, but I barely knew their family. I told them the PlayStation was expensive and I wasn't comfortable having people I didn't know well in my house. The oldest kid promised they would be super careful, but I maintained that my answer was still no. This went on for weeks. They'd catch me getting my mail, taking out trash, coming home from work, always the same request. I started feeling like I was being watched every time I stepped outside. The mother gets involved. About a month into this routine, their mother knocked on my door. She seemed friendly enough at first, introducing herself as my neighbor and mentioning that her boys had told her about my gaming system and wanted to try it out. I explained that they had asked a few times and I had told them I wasn't comfortable with that arrangement. She pressed the issue, asking what harm there could be in letting them play for an hour or two. I repeated that I didn't know their family and the system was really expensive, hoping she would understand. Her tone shifted and she asked if I was saying her children would steal from me or break my things. I clarified that wasn't what I was saying at all, just that I preferred to keep my personal space private. Her friendly demeanor completely changed, and she told me that in a real neighborhood, people help each other out. She insisted her boys were good kids and that I was being unreasonable. I said that I was sorry she felt that way, but my answer hadn't changed. She walked off without another word. Escalation. After that conversation, the requests became demands. The kids would stand in my yard and yell up at my bedroom window, shouting that they knew I was in there and demanding I let them play for just 5 minutes. The middle kid would call me mean for no reason. I started closing my curtains and trying to ignore them, but it was getting ridiculous. I even called their mother once to ask her to control her children, but she hung up on me immediately. Then things got weird. I started noticing the kids hanging around the side of my house where there is a tree close to my roof. They'd whisper among themselves and point up at my bedroom window. I didn't think much of it at first. The break-in attempt? Last Tuesday evening, I was downstairs making dinner when I heard strange noises coming from above. It sounded like someone was walking around on my roof. I went outside and looked up to see all 3 kids on my roof, trying to pry open my bedroom window. I shouted up at them, asking what they were doing and demanding they get down right now. The oldest kid yelled back that they just wanted to borrow it for a little bit. I told them they were insane, that they could fall and get seriously hurt, and they needed to get down immediately. The middle kid called down that they would give it back and promised they meant it. I was absolutely furious. They had climbed the tree in my yard, gotten onto my roof, and were literally trying to break into my house to steal my PlayStation. I threatened to call the police if they didn't get down right away. The fall. That's when everything went wrong. The oldest kid, probably panicking about the police threat, tried to climb down too quickly. I watched in horror and he slipped on the roof tiles and fell straight down, landing hard on the concrete below. The sound was awful. He immediately started screaming and crying. I could see right away that something was seriously wrong with his legs. They were bent at unnatural angles. I ran inside and called 911 immediately. While waiting for the ambulance, I also called the kid's mother to let her know what happened. I told her that her son had fallen off my roof and was badly hurt, and that the ambulance was coming. She asked what I meant about him falling off my roof and what he was doing up there in the first place. I explained that all 3 of her boys were trying to break into my bedroom window to steal my PlayStation. She insisted that was impossible and that her boys wouldn't do that. The aftermath. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. The paramedics confirmed what I already suspected. The kid had broken both legs badly and needed emergency surgery. His brothers were crying and trying to explain to their mother what had really happened. The youngest kid tearfully admitted they just wanted to play the PlayStation and that his brother had said they could borrow it if they could get to it. Karen looked at me with pure rage and declared that this was my fault. She screamed that if I had just let them play my stupid game, none of this would have happened. I explained that her children had trespassed on my property and tried to break into my house, and that I had told them multiple times they couldn't borrow it. She shot back that I could have prevented this by just being a decent neighbor. The police arrived shortly after the ambulance left. I explained the entire situation, including all the previous requests and harassment. The officer took notes and said they'd need to file a report since it involved a break-in attempt and injury on my property. The lawsuit threat? 2 days later, Karen showed up at my door with papers in her hand. She announced that she was suing me for her son's medical bills and emotional trauma, claiming this never would have happened if I weren't so selfish. I told her that her children had tried to break into my house and that I had security cameras that recorded the whole thing. She argued that I had encouraged them by flaunting my expensive toys and then refusing to share. I pointed out that I had never flaunted anything and had simply brought a box into my own house. She declared that we would see what a judge thought about my negligence in maintaining a safe property. She was actually trying to sue me because her kids got hurt while attempting to burglarize my house. Getting legal help? I immediately contacted a lawyer my friend had recommended. After reviewing the security footage and police report, he was confident we had a strong case. He explained that not only did I have no liability here, but we should consider pressing charges for attempted breaking and entering, trespassing, and harassment. I asked if that was really necessary since the kid was already hurt pretty badly. My lawyer pointed out that they had committed multiple crimes on my property and that the injury didn't erase the criminal behavior. He was right. I decided to move forward with pressing charges. The tables turned. Within a week, Karen's lawsuit was dismissed, and she was facing criminal charges for allowing her minor children to attempt burglary. My lawyer contacted her attorney to discuss the charges. A few days later, my lawyer called with an update. He told me her attorney had called, wanting to set up a meeting because apparently she wanted to apologize and ask me to drop the charges. I asked if he was serious, and he confirmed that the reality of potential jail time and having a criminal record was starting to sink in for her. The meeting was held at my lawyer's office. Karen came in looking completely different from the aggressive woman who had been harassing me for months. She looked tired and defeated. She started by saying she wanted to apologize for everything that happened and admitting she knew her boys were wrong to go on my roof. I corrected her that they weren't just wrong. They had tried to break into my house. She said she understood that now and explained that she had been angry about her son getting hurt. So she blamed me when she should have been angry at herself for not controlling their behavior. My lawyer told her that I was willing to consider dropping charges if she agreed to certain conditions. She desperately agreed to anything and begged me not to let her go to jail because she was all her boys had. The conditions were simple. She had to pay for any damage to my property, agreed to keep her children away from my house entirely, and attend parenting classes. She quickly agreed to everything and pleaded again for me not to press charges. My decision: I told her I would drop the charges on one condition beyond what my lawyer had mentioned. She anxiously asked what it was. I explained that she needed to have a serious conversation with her boys about what they did. She promised she would and said she had already started having those conversations. The real ending. But here's where the story gets interesting. When we were leaving the lawyer's office, Karen made one last comment that changed everything. She said that she still thought I could have just let them play the game once in a while, and that it would have solved all of this. That's when I realized she still didn't get it. She was apologizing because she was scared of jail time, not because she actually understood that her family's behavior was completely unacceptable. I announced that I had changed my mind. My lawyer asked if I meant about dropping charges, and I confirmed that was exactly what I meant. I explained that if she still thought I should have just given in to their demands after everything that happened, she hadn't learned anything. Karen panicked and begged me to wait, insisting she didn't mean it like that. I told her she meant it exactly like that, and that her son broke both his legs because she taught her children that they're entitled to other people's things, and she still thought that way. We walked away, and I decided to proceed with the charges. I work in software consulting and travel constantly for different clients. For the past 3 months, I've been on the road almost every week. This one trip took me from Seattle to Miami with a layover in Denver. When I got to my gate for the final flight, I was exhausted. My phone battery was almost dead, so I found a charging station near the gate counter. The area was crowded with families heading to Florida for vacation. I had thrown on a navy blazer that morning for a client meeting. It was wrinkled from being stuffed in my carry-on, but at least my phone could charge. I stood there minding my own business when this woman came walking toward me fast. She wore a bright pink tracksuit that looked expensive and dragged 2 huge suitcases. Her face was red and she looked angry about something. She stopped right in front of me, breathing hard. She told me she finally found someone who could fix her problem. She said her seat was right next to the toilet and sounded really upset. I looked at her, confused about why she was telling me this. I said that sounded unfortunate. She slapped her boarding pass into my hand, like she was handing me important papers. She told me to move her to business class because she had a disability. She said she couldn't sit near the bathroom with all the noise and smell. I looked at the boarding pass. Economy class, middle seat, row 34. I was still confused about why she thought I could help. I started to tell her I didn't work there, but she cut me off. She told me not to act stupid. She said people like me always pretend not to understand when we mess up. She claimed she asked for an aisle seat in front when she booked. That's when I realized she thought I worked for the airline. I looked around trying to figure out why. Then I saw the real gate agent walking over. She wore the same navy blazer as me and looked just as tired. We could have been twins, except she actually worked there. The woman in the tracksuit turned when she saw the agent coming. She told the agent her timing was perfect. She pointed at me and called me a trainee. She told the agent to make me fix her seat. She complained she had been waiting 20 minutes for someone competent. The gate agent looked at me, then at the woman, then back at me. She looked confused and asked what the woman meant by trainee. The woman tapped her foot waiting for results. She said I was the trainee who had been standing around doing nothing instead of helping customers. She demanded to be moved to business class right away. I decided this was my chance to leave. I handed the boarding pass back to her with a professional smile. I told her my shift just ended. Then I walked to Starbucks like I was clocking out of work. I could hear the woman starting to say something, but I didn't look back. The barista was a college kid who looked as tired as I felt. He asked what I wanted, and I ordered a large black coffee. I told him to make it strong. He said it looked like I had a rough day. I told him he had no idea. When my coffee was ready, I found a seat where I could still see the gate. The woman in the tracksuit was still there with the gate agent. Her whole attitude had changed. She wasn't waving her arms around anymore. She stood perfectly still, looking shocked. The gate agent was probably explaining that I didn't work for the airline. The woman's face went from confused to embarrassed to horrified. She was now talking to the real agent but not demanding anything. She was almost begging. The agent stayed professional. Economy class was economy class. Without proper medical documentation, no upgrade was happening, especially after making a scene and mistaking a passenger for an employee. The woman kept pointing back to where I had been standing. She was probably trying to explain what happened, but the damage was done. She went from acting like she owned the place to wanting to disappear. About 30 minutes later, they started boarding. I watched the woman get in line with the other economy passengers. She still dragged her two big suitcases. No business class upgrade, no aisle seat, just the middle seat next to the bathroom she started with. When I walked past her in the boarding line, she looked up at me. For a second, I thought she might say something, but she just looked away fast and her face turned red again. My flight got to Miami about an hour late because of weather, but it was worth it just to see her face when she realized I didn't work there. I work as a physical therapist and deal with chronic pain from an old sports injury I got in college. My doctor told me to use hot tubs regularly to help with muscle tension and inflammation. It became this really important part of my routine. 20 minutes in the hot tub after work helps me decompress and manage the pain that flares up from being on my feet all day. What most people don't know about me is that I'm autistic. I was diagnosed later in life, around 25, which explained a lot about why I'd always felt different. When I was growing up, my parents worked really hard to teach me social skills and how to be considerate of others in public spaces. It wasn't always easy, but they never used my autism as an excuse for inappropriate behavior. They taught me that being autistic meant I might need to work a little harder to understand social situations, but it didn't mean I got a free pass to ignore common courtesy. So last Tuesday, I went to my usual community center for my hot tub session. It was around 6 p.m. and there were already 3 other people in there. An elderly man reading quietly in the corner, a middle-aged woman with her eyes closed clearly trying to relax, and another guy who looked like he'd just finished a workout. The atmosphere was exactly what you'd expect from a hot tub. Peaceful, quiet, therapeutic. I slipped in and found my usual spot, feeling that immediate relief when the warm water started working on my tight muscles. For about 10 minutes, everything was perfect. Then this woman walked over with what looked like her son. maybe around 12 years old. The kid immediately cannonballed into the hot tub, sending water splashing everywhere. The elderly man's book got soaked, and the woman who'd been relaxing jerked awake when water hit her face. The woman said this was exactly what they needed and settled herself in while her son started treating the hot tub like his personal playground. He was jumping from side to side, yelling at the top of his lungs, and creating waves that sloshed water out onto the deck. The boy shouted at his mother to watch him do a backflip. The elderly man politely said that this was supposed to be a quiet relaxation area. The woman immediately told him that her son was autistic and was just having fun. The kid continued his chaos, now pretending to be some kind of sea monster, roaring and thrashing around. The other woman, in the hot tub, looked increasingly uncomfortable. She asked if the mother could maybe get her son to calm down a little, explaining that some people were there for therapeutic reasons. The mother got defensive and said her son was autistic and this was how he enjoyed the water. She pointed toward the main swimming area and told us that if we didn't like it, there was a whole pool right over there. I felt my jaw clench. Being someone who's autistic myself, this kind of attitude makes my blood boil. It's not about the kid being autistic, it's about basic respect for shared spaces. I told her that being autistic doesn't mean he can't learn appropriate behavior for different settings. She got angry and asked if I was his parent, demanding to know if I understood what it was like raising an autistic child. I explained that I was actually autistic myself, and my parents had taught me that autism wasn't an excuse to ignore social expectations. The woman's face went red. Her son, meanwhile, had started splashing the elderly man directly, who was trying to protect his now ruined book. She claimed I clearly didn't understand severe autism and that her son needed this kind of sensory input. I pointed out that the main pool had plenty of sensory input, and hot tubs were meant for quiet relaxation. The boy complained to his mother that we were being mean to him. She used this to say that we were upsetting him and declared that he had every right to be there. The workouts guy finally spoke up and said, "We all paid the same membership fees." He explained that we weren't asking the kid to leave, just to tone it down a bit. The mother accused us of discrimination and threatened to call the manager. I told her to please do that because I'd love to hear their policy on hot tub etiquette. She walked out, dragging her son with her. 5 minutes later, she returned with a young staff member who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The staff member asked about the disagreement that had supposedly happened. The woman immediately claimed we were discriminating against her autistic son and trying to ban him from the hot tub. I explained that we had only asked for basic courtesy and pointed out that hot tubs had posted rules about appropriate behavior. The staff member looked at the clearly visible sign that listed hot tub rules about maintaining quiet voices, no diving or jumping, and respecting other patrons. He told the woman that these rules applied to everyone and that autism didn't exempt anyone from basic facility guidelines. The mother called the whole situation ridiculous and announced they were canceling their membership. She grabbed her son's hand and walked toward the exit, but turned back to yell that we had no compassion and he was just a child. After they left, the elderly man shook his head sadly and said that he worked with special needs kids. He said that kind of parenting doesn't help anyone. I agreed and explained that autism advocacy should be about inclusion with accommodation, not exemption from all social expectations. The other woman nodded and shared that her nephew was autistic and his parents worked hard to teach him appropriate behavior in different settings. She said it was actually helping him succeed. We spent the rest of our session talking about how real autism advocacy means teaching adaptive skills, not demanding that the world accommodate every behavior. The kid wasn't the problem, his mother's refusal to parent him was. When I got home, I looked up the community center's online reviews. Sure enough, there was a brand new 1-star review posted just an hour earlier, claiming the facility discriminated against disabled children. But scrolling through the comments, I saw multiple responses from other parents of autistic children supporting the center's policies and explaining how important consistent expectations are for helping their kids develop social skills. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.